Hello Internet, and welcome back to my reviews of the DCEU. Last time we covered Man of Steel, and now we made it up to the second overall entry in the DCEU, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Released on March 25th, 2016, and directed once again by Zack Snyder, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is a direct follow-up to Man of Steel. It doesn't technically count as a sequel per se, because Superman is one of the main focuses, if not the main focus. This film was announced at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2013, a few months after the release of Man of Steel. And let me tell you, people have been begging for Batman and Superman to come face to face on the big screen for years. So you can imagine the excitement when this film was first announced. However, when this film was released, it did not meet anyone's expectations. This film marks the return of Henry Cavill as Superman, Amy Adams as Lois Lane, Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White, and Diane Lane as Clark Kent's adopted mother Martha.
Why did you say that name?
And yes, I will get to that fucking meme later on in this video. And then we have newcomers to the cast. We have Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne, or Batman. I'm not gonna lie, when Ben Affleck was first cast as Batman, I was a bit skeptical, as were other people out there. But I really liked his performance in this movie. Of course, he's not the best Batman out there, unlike Robert Pattinson and Matt Reeves as the Batman, or Kevin Conroy. But Ben Affleck was a pretty good pick at the time for Batman. Fresh off the success of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale as Batman. There's Jeremy Irons as Alfred Pennyworth. Jeremy Irons is best known for providing the voice of Scar in The Lion King, and he played Hans Gruber's brother in Die Hard with a Vengeance. We have Jesse Eisenberg as quite possibly the worst Lex Luthor we've ever seen on screen. This role was extremely miscast, not only upon announcement, but during the final product. He just didn't do it for me. I mean, he's pretty good in Zombieland, The Social Network, and Now You See Me, but he's just not a good Lex Luthor. His performance in this movie reminded me too much of the Joker. The best Lex Luthor will always be Gene Hackman. We have Holly Hunter as Senator June Finch. Holly Hunter is best known for voicing Elastigirl in The Incredibles. And then, we have the on-screen debut of Gal Gadot as Diana Prince, or Wonder Woman. Believe it or not, I actually reviewed this film as Sonic and Sonic back on my old channel in 2016 when it first came out. And boy, let me tell you, I have a lot to say about this movie, and it's not all good things. In an age where Marvel has been dominating the box office with the MCU and the Avengers, Warner Brothers and DC wanted to rival Marvel at the box office by setting up the Justice League with Batman v Superman. But the result was just one straight-up convoluted mess. They tried to shoehorn way too many characters into this movie, like Doomsday. Doomsday is an iconic character from the comics, but he had no reason to be in this movie whatsoever. A movie all about Batman going head-to-head with Superman. Plus, I don't like the way he looks in this movie. He looks more like the cave troll from The Lord of the Rings than fucking Doomsday. Also, was introducing Wonder Woman in this movie alone the best idea? I mean, yes, we got Wonder Woman the following year, which I will talk about after I'm done reviewing Suicide Squad. But I'm not sure why Wonder Woman was introduced in this movie. Not to mention appearances from Ezra Miller as The Flash, Jason Momoa as Aquaman, and Ray Fisher as Cyborg. I felt that this movie was extremely rushed in setting up the Justice League, while Marvel, on the other hand, fleshed out each character before the Avengers first came together in 2012. And then we got new characters to add to the roster like the Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, and Captain Marvel. But in Batman v Superman, pretty much every member of the Justice League who's not Batman or Superman was shoehorned into this movie for no fucking reason. There is an extended edition of this film that's 3 hours long and is rated R called the Ultimate Edition, which was released to home media formats later on in 2016. The Ultimate Edition features 31 minutes of additional footage that were not included in the theatrical cut. And frankly, the Ultimate Edition is the definitive way to watch the movie because it fleshes out storylines more, while the theatrical cut is mostly convoluted and doesn't make sense at times. And I can easily say the same about Zack Snyder's Justice League versus the shitty theatrical cut, which I will talk about after I'm done reviewing Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman. I will be talking about both the theatrical cut of this movie and the Ultimate Edition in this video, and how each version compares to one another. Again, the Ultimate Edition is the definitive way to watch this movie. This film took inspiration from two comic book storylines. For one, we have The Dark Knight Returns, and then we have The Death of Superman. And this film also serves as a reboot to Batman, after his portrayal in Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises. And therefore, Ben Affleck portrays a much different take on Batman than what we saw from Christian Bale, in both a good way and a bad way. This video will contain spoilers to Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, so if you've not seen it yet, please do so before watching this video. But I'm going to tell you now, you're better off watching the Ultimate Edition than the original PG-13 theatrical cut, but that's just me. Anyway, let's get started. Here's a full analysis and my thoughts on Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The movie starts off with an opening credit sequence where we see a young Bruce Wayne's parents get murdered in an alleyway, which is seen a lot in movies, TV, and comics nowadays. Some other examples being Tim Burton's Batman from 1989, Batman Begins, and even Joker. And I really like some of the shots in this scene, like the gun upon being fired breaking Martha Wayne's pearl necklace. And then, in his dying breath, Thomas Wayne, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, calls out to Martha, later foreshadowing the scene where Batman and Superman spontaneously become allies, all because their mothers are both named Martha. And we also see a young Bruce Wayne falling into the cave with bats. That's when he develops his phobia of bats. Now, this is after Thomas and Martha are shot and killed. But when this same scene is shown in Batman Begins, they're both still alive. And also, this is the first movie where Bill Finger is credited for creating Batman, as Bob Kane took all the credit for previous portrayals of Batman for the past Lord knows how many decades. Cut to the attack of Metropolis as seen in the final act of Man of Steel, where Bruce Wayne finds himself in Metropolis when shit is going down, and he witnesses a whole bunch of destruction going on. And he blames Superman for all the collateral damage the city sustained, and all the deaths that occurred. And even people who work for Bruce end up getting killed in the attack of Metropolis. And another guy whose legs got amputated, and who committed a hate crime by vandalizing a statue of Superman. 18 months after the events of Man of Steel, Superman has become a controversial figure due to the destruction that happened in Man of Steel. 2 months after this film's release, we got Captain America: Civil War, another movie that revolves around the consequences of the hero's actions, and how much collateral damage occurs during the Avengers' heroics. And then, a huge fight between two iconic superheroes. That, of course, being Iron Man and Captain America. I felt that Captain America: Civil War handled this premise better than Batman v Superman, but that's just me. In the South Indian Ocean, a diver discovers debris from a Kryptonian ship containing a green crystal. That, of course, being Superman's weakness, kryptonite. And then, a firefight in a desert in Africa where Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen, who is a CIA agent instead of a Daily Planet photographer, interview the leader of the warlord in a raging civil war. And there, we see a guy who works for Lex Luthor, whose character name I can never for the life of me pronounce. So I'm just gonna refer to him as Hydra Guy, because he is played by Callan Mulvey, who plays a Hydra operative in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. The camera that Jimmy Olsen is carrying has a tracking device in it, allowing the CIA to track his whereabouts, and he is then shot and killed. And during the firefight, a bullet gets lodged in a journal, and at some point in the middle of the movie, Secretary Calvin Swanwick, played by Henry Lennox, analyzes the bullet in the journal and traces it to Lex Luthor. Hold up! Did I just hear my name? Yes, Calvin, you did. Well, son of a bitch! And then, as Lois is being held hostage, in comes Superman, who saves her, but also causes more collateral damage. And thus, he is seen as a controversial figure by Senator June Finch, played by Holly Hunter. That he needs to be held accountable for his actions, not only during the events of Man of Steel, but also during the firefight in the desert. We then cut to Gotham City, in which Bruce Wayne has been fighting crime as Batman for 20 years. So he's way more experienced as Batman than what we saw from Robert Pattinson in Matt Reeves as the Batman. And one thing this version of Batman does is brand his victims with the bat symbol, something he would never do in the comics or any other form of Batman media. And after making out with Lois in a fucking bathtub, Clark is assigned by Perry to cover a story about a football game in Gotham, rather than on the vigilante in Gotham known as Batman. And at the same time, one of the victims of the attack on Metropolis, whose legs got amputated, vandalizes the statue of Superman. Thus, Clark is heartbroken over how certain people view him. Now, my biggest issue with Batman v Superman is the pacing. The first two acts are very slow, and they go nowhere story-wise. We don't get to see the showdown between Batman and Superman until nearly the end of the film. However, Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent do come face-to-face for the first time when a miscast Lex Luthor hosts a gala, in which Diana Prince is a guest. I say miscast for several reasons. 1. Jesse Eisenberg was never a good casting choice to begin with. 2. His performance was questionable to say the least. 3. The part where he forces a cherry-flavored Jolly Rancher into some random sumbitch's mouth. 4. The jar of Granny's peach tea in the courtroom hearing in Washington, D.C. That right there is reference to a scene where Senator Finch has a talk with Lex, and she says to take a bucket of piss and call it Granny's peach tea. I don't know if it was actually peach tea, or if Jesse Eisenberg went into the bathroom and created the Granny's peach tea. Now I'm disturbed for life! So anyway, Lex wants to discuss the kryptonite found in the Indian Ocean, while also bringing up metahumans, because there are superpowered individuals out there aside from Superman. The only ones we see in this series are Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Cyborg, The Flash, and several members of the Suicide Squad. Lex seeks to weaponize the kryptonite and use it against Superman, since that's Superman's #1 weakness, aside from not being able to see through lead. Lex requests access to the Kryptonian ship that is being held in Metropolis for science purposes, to say the least. And he wants to see General Zod's body to test the kryptonite to see if it has effects on Kryptonians, and it turns out it does. And that's when Lex plots to destroy Superman. He keeps rambling about philosophical bullshit about God and man, as if he was a professor of philosophy instead of a science genius. And also, this movie's version of Batman has a vocal synthesizer that makes him sound auto-tuned, whereas Christian Bale, whenever he talks as Batman, sounds like he needs a glass of water between takes. This decision for Ben Affleck's Batman voice, I feel, is weird and not in a good way. I'm just not a fan of the way it sounds. However, in Ben Affleck's brief appearance in The Flash, the synthesizer goes away and he just talks in his normal voice. Bruce Wayne is in the Batcave with Alfred, played by Jeremy Irons. They're conducting an investigation on some dude known as the White Portuguese. But it turns out that White Portuguese is not a person, but a ship carrying the kryptonite that he wants to use for his personal vendetta against Superman. This leads him to Hydra Guy, who he believes has information regarding the White Portuguese, and it turns out he works for Lex Luthor, in which he is invited to the gala where he comes face to face with Clark Kent for the first time. Bruce's mission at the gala is to steal encrypted data from LexCorp's mainframe, but it's stolen by Diana Prince first. Before that, Bruce and Clark begin to have an interview, in which Clark is representing the Daily Planet. There, they give their differing opinions on the Gotham Vigilante, and Superman being a controversial figure. And then, we have a montage of clips in which Superman is helping people around the world, while we get a brief cameo appearance from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Bruce comes face to face with Diana at a museum, in which she returns the data that she stole before Bruce did. Diana believes that Lex has a photo of her from World War I, in which the first Wonder Woman film revolves around. And since it was encrypted, she gives it back to Bruce, all while Clark's adopted mother tells him not to be concerned about what other people think of him, despite all the controversy revolving around Superman. And then, a nightmare sequence where we see the one thing nobody wanted to see from Batman, him holding a fucking gun. In this sequence, we see a bunch of soldiers with the Superman emblem on their uniforms, and a brief look at the parademons from both Justice League movies. I say both, because one is a shitty theatrical cut with cringeworthy footage shot by Joss Whedon, while the other is a 4-hour director's cut that's the DC equivalent of Mary Poppins.
Practically perfect in every way.
Sorry to say this, Mary Poppins, but Batman v Superman is far from being practically perfect. This nightmare takes place in a post-apocalyptic landscape in which Superman is a tyrannical leader, just like the first Injustice game in which Superman is the main antagonist. Like I said in my review of Man of Steel, there is a major difference between Superman and Homelander. Homelander does things that Superman would never in a million years do. Batman is then tied up following a battle against soldiers wearing the Superman emblem, and is approached by Superman as he lasers people to death, like Homelander would do without hesitation. And when Bruce wakes up, he is visited by Ezra Miller as a future version of the Flash. He proceeds to tell him that Lois Lane is the key, but of course he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And this scene is not explained at all in the theatrical cut of Justice League, and it's never brought up again until Zack Snyder's Justice League. The Flash even advises him that he was right about Superman, that he should assemble the Justice League to go up against a major threat. Now that right there goes to show that this movie is just rushing to set up the Justice League, whereas Marvel took their time with setting up the Avengers, as teased by Nick Fury in the post-credit scene of Iron Man back in 2008. Each Avenger got their own movie before they assembled for the first time in 2012. The only Justice League members to get their own movies before the 2017 theatrical cut were Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. We didn't get an Aquaman and Flash movie until after Justice League came out. We were supposed to get a Cyborg movie, but that got scrapped. Same with the Batgirl movie that already finished shooting before it got the fucking boot. And upon waking up from the nightmare, the data is finished decrypting, and we see that White Portuguese is actually a ship carrying the kryptonite to deliver it to Lex. The encrypted drive also has data on the metahumans who would eventually become members of the Justice League. And we get a pretty exciting Batmobile chase, where Batman wants to get his hands on the kryptonite so he can kill Superman, as he deems Superman a threat to humanity. But Alfred pleads to Bruce that Superman is not the enemy. However, Bruce doesn't listen and proceeds to go through with his vendetta against Superman. And at the end of the Batmobile chase, Batman comes face to face with Superman for the first time.
Next time they shine your light in the sky, don't go to it. The bat is dead. Bury it. Consider this mercy.
Tell me. Do you bleed?
before Batman could get his hands on the kryptonite, it is brought over to LexCorp according to a tracking device he planted. Remember Lois Lane? Well, this movie certainly doesn't, because it keeps shifting focus over to Batman and his vendetta against Superman. She gets an unnecessary side plot involving analyzing the bullet that hit the journal in the desert at the beginning of the movie. General Swanwick reveals to her that the bullet wasn't made by any known manufacturer, but in fact, LexCorp. I feel like Lex's plans throughout Batman v Superman are too complex and convoluted for me to understand. His plan is to take down Superman and frame him for all the death and destruction that Lex himself was responsible for. That's just about as complex and convoluted as Zemo's plan all throughout Captain America Civil War, tearing the Avengers apart from the inside. Batman v Superman and Captain America Civil War are pretty much the same movie, except for a few minor differences, and Captain America Civil War is not a film I plan on reviewing on this channel anytime soon. In this film, Lex manipulates both Batman and Superman into fighting to the death as part of his convoluted plan that's way too complex for me to understand. However, I'm not going to drink an entire bottle of liquor going through this movie, but I'm going to need some serious liquor for getting through the theatrical cut of Justice League and Suicide Squad, of course. Not James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, but the next film I'm going to talk about after this that's just called Suicide Squad. But anyway, let's continue. Superman is then called to a congressional hearing to question his actions at the end of Man of Steel. And while Senator Finch begins her opening speech, she finds a jar of Granny's peach tea and realizes that she's fucked when Lex isn't there for the hearing, and the wheelchair the amputated victim is on has a bomb planted in it and blows up the courthouse. This is all part of Lex's convoluted plan to frame Superman. And also, earlier on in the film, when the amputated victim comes face to face with Lex Luthor for the first time, in the Ultimate Edition, he says, "What the fuck do you want?" When in the theatrical version, he just says, "What do you want?" I think they shot that scene twice. Once for a PG-13 cut of the movie, and another for the R-rated cut. That's just like how in the trailer for Birds of Prey, Harley says,
"I'm the one they should be scared of. Not you, not Mr. J. Because I'm Harley freaking Quinn."
When in the actual movie itself, she says,
"But I'm the one they should be scared of. Not you, not Mr. J. Because I'm Harley fucking Quinn."
Don't you just love it when a scene is shot twice? Once for the trailer, and another time for the actual fucking movie? That's just like the extended cut of The Wolverine, where Logan says, "You're going through that fucking window." Well, the theatrical cut just says, "You're going through that window." They could have gone with the one fuck rule with the PG-13 cut of Batman v Superman, but they just saved it for the R-rated Ultimate Edition. Again, we don't get the PG-13 one fuck rule in the DCEU until The Flash. After Superman is framed for the explosion, he goes into self-imposed exile, where we see a brief cameo from Kevin Costner. This is also where Lex discovers that Batman stole the kryptonite, as he leaves his calling card at the scene. That, of course, being his Batarang. In Shazam, we see that Freddy, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, has a Batarang as a collector's item, as well as a bullet that was fired at Superman. Lex enters the Kryptonian ship and uses Zod's fingerprints to access the Genesis Chamber, and learns information about hundreds of different worlds out there that sadly we don't get to see from this universe. We only get a brief glimpse of the Green Lanterns in both Justice League movies, but nothing on Hal Jordan or John Stewart. We won't be seeing that until the HBO series Lanterns, with Kyle Chandler and Aaron Pierre. And it's obvious from the casting alone that Kyle Chandler will be a much better Hal Jordan than Ryan Reynolds ever was. And it wasn't Ryan Reynolds' fault for Green Lantern being a shitty movie. It was the writing and the effects department. What about me? I got a damn good Green Lantern cosplay here. Let's see. Green supersuit? Check. Animated supersuit? Check. Worse acting range than Ryan Reynolds? Check. A character who would not look good in live action compared to Keanu Reeves' portrayal of me in Sonic the Hedgehog 3? Check. Fuck off, Shadow!
When you've quite finished. Thank you.
Anyway, before I got rudely interrupted by Shadow and Silver, Batman is getting ready to fight Superman by doing rigorous exercise and using the kryptonite to create gas canisters and a spear with a kryptonite tip. I don't think Nick Fury is gonna like seeing Batman with a kryptonite spear.
Sir, please put down the spear.
And then we get what I like to call the Iron Bat, an armored bat suit that Ben Affleck only wears once in the entire series and is never seen again. Not in Suicide Squad, not in Justice League, not in Zack Snyder's Justice League, not even The Flush. And while Bruce is decrypting Lex's drive, he comes across files on 4 metahumans. Those, of course, being Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Cyborg, and The Flash. He comes across a photograph of Wonder Woman and a ragtag team of World War I allies, including Chris Pine himself. And with Lex He brings Zod's body into the Genesis chamber to defile it with Lex's own blood. Zod's body transforms into an ugly monstrosity that later turns out to be Doomsday. Again, Doomsday had no reason to be in this movie at all. He was just shoehorned into the movie for the sole purpose of providing fan service and nothing more. This movie is supposed to be about Batman going face to face with Superman, not setting up the Justice League while being crunched on time. Like I said, Marvel got the win for that one, setting up an iconic superhero team on the silver screen, while DC, on the other hand, had to cram a whole bunch of bullshit into one film and expect good results. However, upon this movie's release, the results were not good at all, and they are still not good to this day. Alfred tries unsuccessfully to talk Bruce out of fighting Superman, and then Hydra Guy captures Martha and Lex holds her for ransom, all while it's raining in Gotham with the Iron Bat ready to rip Superman a new one. Lois Lane then enters Lex Corp Tower and is captured by Hydra Guy herself, and she's brought to Lex, and he lures Superman to him after revealing that the fastest way to get to Superman is a pretty little road called Lois Lane. And so, he pushes her off the tower, and she's saved by Superman. And then, Superman gets so pissed off at Lex when he reveals that he's holding his mother for ransom.
Where's she?
I don't know! I would not let them tell me! Now, if you kill me, Martha dies. And if you fly away, Martha also dies. But if you kill the bat, Martha lives.
So he's pretty much blackmailing Superman into fighting Batman, since that was his plan all along. Black and Blue, Fight Night, the greatest gladiator match in the history of the world. God versus man, day versus night, Son of Krypton versus Bat of Gotham. After spouting nonsense that a college philosophy professor would say, and not Lex Luthor. And apparently, Lex knows that Clark Kent is actually Superman, and Superman actually knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman. They don't explain this whatsoever. That's one of the many things about this movie that bothers me. Superman then flies over to Gotham to the Bat Signal to try to talk some sense into Batman, but Batman just isn't buying it and is ready to fight Superman to the death. And that's what the entire movie should have been. Batman versus Superman. Not what we ended up getting in the final product. And before the fight goes down, the film reminds us that Diana Prince is in this movie, when she receives an email from Bruce practically questioning her identity and her origins. This email contains the photograph from World War I, and the files on Aquaman, Cyborg, and The Flash, and brief cameos from Jason Momoa, Ray Fisher, and Ezra Miller. Meanwhile, with Lois, she requests a chopper to fly her over to Gotham to stop the fight between Batman and Superman, and the fight takes them to the dilapidated ruins of what used to be Wayne Manor. And then, the fight between Batman and Superman. The fight becomes evenly matched when the Iron Bat armor withstands Superman's attacks, and Batman uses his kryptonite weaponry to weaken Superman. Batman has the upper hand against Superman, and as he's ready to impale Superman with a kryptonite spear, we get the stupidest scene in the history of DC movies. However, some argue that when Superman pleads Batman to save Martha, Batman begins, no pun intended to Christopher Nolan's first Batman film, to sense Superman's sense of humanity, that he's not the monster he thought he was. But this scene alone resulted in so many memes brewing, and being made fun of in movies like Deadpool 2 and, I hate to say this, Teen Titans Go to the Movies. Batman and Superman are suddenly cool, all because their mothers are both named Martha. That's like Shadow the Hedgehog having an aneurysm upon watching The Sound of Music and West Side Story back to back, while learning the names of the characters played by Julie Andrews and Natalie Wood, respectively. All while each movie contains songs simply called Maria. I can confirm this is true. Silver won't stop taunting me with it, especially with his crappy whistling. Fuck off, Shadow!
When you've quite finished.
Thank you, Dowie!
Thank you.
And then, as Batman is ready to kill Superman after dropping Martha's name, and him having flashbacks of his parents' death when he was a kid, in comes Lois to tell him that Superman's mother's name is Martha. And so, Batman then comes to his senses and stops fighting Superman, and realizes that Superman is not a threat to humanity. Batman agrees to save Superman's mother, and Superman goes over to the Kryptonian ship in Metropolis, where an electrical discharge is occurring as a result of Lex using his blood to mutilate the corpse of Zod to create Doomsday. And then, Lois tosses the kryptonite spear into a pool of water to dispose of it, not realizing that Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are gonna need it later. Batman then goes to the warehouse in the Batwing to fuck up Lex's goons, and even Hydra Guy to save Martha. And in the Ultimate Edition, there's added blood to Batman hurling a crate at some of the goons. And this is where Ben Affleck goes against Batman's code when it comes to not killing anyone. Michael Keaton has that same issue, not so much Christian Bale or Robert Pattinson. And after killing Hydra Guy, Batman reveals to Martha that he's friends with his son, and Martha figures so because of Edna Mode's worst nightmare.
It's okay. I'm a friend of your son's.
I figured. The cape?
No capes, darling. How many times do I have to tell you some bitches about capes? Have you not been paying attention to my stories about Thunderhead getting his cape snagged on a missile fin, Stratogale getting a cape caught in a jet turbine, Meta Man in an express elevator, Guy snagged on takeoff, and Splashdown sucked into a vortex? It's bad enough that Homelander, Omni-Man, and Doctor Strange ignored my warnings, darling. So next time one of you decides to suit up for hero work, no fucking capes! So Martha is saved, and Lex learns of Superman's failure to kill Batman, and Batman saving Martha. And so, a battle ensues with the film's most unnecessary villain, Doomsday. And not Avengers Doomsday with Robert Downey Jr. playing Dr. Doom that took the place of Avengers of the Kang Dynasty upon Jonathan Majors getting the boot from Marvel. I mean, this cave troll looking sumbitch. Doomsday appears to be getting the upper hand against Superman in this fight. And in one desperate move, Superman sends Doomsday flying into space while the president, who for some reason is not Barack Obama, intends to shoot Doomsday down with a nuclear missile, despite the protests from Secretary Swanwick. And the resulting explosion is so large that Batman can easily see it from Earth. The fight is far from over when Doomsday survives the explosion, and it makes him stronger. Now while Batman is about to
blow up into smithereens and spew my tiny symphony,
in comes Wonder Woman to save the day while we get her iconic theme from Hans Zimmer.
She with you?
I thought she was with you.
So yes, this is the first time we see Wonder Woman on the big screen that's not the Lego movie. But she's not referred to as Wonder Woman until Zack Snyder's Justice League, Peacemaker Season 1, Shazam Fury of the Gods, and The Flash. And now, the holy trinity of the Justice League has come together for the very first time on the silver screen, consisting of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Batman deduces that Doomsday is weak to kryptonite, like Superman. Meanwhile in Gotham, Lois tries to retrieve the kryptonite spear and almost drowns in the process, while the only way out of the water is blocked off by rubble. And so, Superman grabs the spear, upon realizing that the only way to destroy Doomsday is if he makes the ultimate sacrifice. And so, Superman takes the spear and sacrifices his own life to destroy the cave troll once and for all. This results in the untimely death of Superman. 2 movies in, and Superman dies. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of pathetic, killing off Superman 2 movies in. But we do see him again when Henry Cavill's mustache is removed with nightmare-inducing CGI, as well as the real Justice League movie, and his brief appearance at the very end of Black Adam, while Superman is played by doubles in Shazam, Peacemaker Season 1, and The Flash. And so, the world mourns the death of not only Superman, but Clark Kent as well. There is an empty casket in Metropolis where the footage is recycled for Suicide Squad, while Clark's actual body is buried in Smallville, and Lex's head is shaved upon being in prison, and is visited by Batman with the warning that he'll always be watching. And did I mention how shitty the idea of casting Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor was in the first place? It's the worst casting choice since Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg in Uncharted. There's perfectly cast roles, and there's the ones that are miscast. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, perfect casting. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, perfect casting. Ben Schwartz as Sonic, perfect casting. Keanu Reeves as Shadow, perfect casting. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, painfully miscast! Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince visit Clark's grave in Smallville and make a plan to set up the Justice League by finding the other metahumans to go up against a brewing threat in the form of Steppenwolf in both Justice League movies, and Darkseid in Zack Snyder's Justice League. And as dirt is scattered onto Clark's coffin, we see a brief shot of the dirt rising as the movie ends. I'm giving Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice a 4 out of 10. This entire movie is one big convoluted mess. It was completely rushed in setting up the Justice League, and the first 2 acts were a chore to get through. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor was easily the worst thing about this movie. He was so painfully miscast that nobody, not even me, took him seriously. I still say the best Lex Luthor is Gene Hackman. Ben Affleck was a pretty good choice to play Batman at the time, but he's not my personal favorite Batman, unlike Kevin Conroy and Robert Pattinson. The Ultimate Edition, on the other hand, I give a 6 out of 10. That edition added so much more to the film and is the definitive way to watch it in my honest opinion. You can watch either or, but I personally recommend the Ultimate Edition over the theatrical cut. I still say the Martha scene during the film's climax is the dumbest scene in DC history, given the fact that both Batman and Superman have mothers named Martha. Everybody familiar with the comics knew this, but this movie wanted to put it out there and make a huge fucking meme out of it. A lot of characters were shoehorned into the movie for no rhyme or reason, especially Doomsday. And nobody knows why Wonder Woman showed up in this movie in the first place, not her own solo origin story. Eventually, 1 year later, we got Wonder Woman, which is my favorite film in the franchise, which I will talk about after my next video on Suicide Squad. All in all, the end result of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is just one big convoluted mess that crams so many story elements into a 2-hour movie. That's one of the major reasons why so many film adaptations of young adult books fail, like Twilight, Divergent, and The Maze Runner. They try to cram so many details into one movie to disastrous results. I read Twilight back in middle school, and I was obligated to watch the films. But let's be real here, I was never a fan of Twilight. The Hunger Games, on the other hand, I couldn't put those books down. And I would imagine that I will be spending countless hours reading Sunrise on the Reaping when that book comes out. But back onto my closing thoughts on Batman v Superman. This movie disappointed me on so many levels when it came to a story where Batman goes head-to-head against Superman, and rushing into setting up the Justice League. The newcomers to the cast did alright, except for Jesse Eisenberg, and the fight scenes were exciting to watch, but the overall story was just not that great. And this is one of the many reasons why I favor Captain America Civil War over Batman v Superman. Just because the fight scenes are exciting to watch doesn't automatically make it a good movie, and Batman v Superman is not a good movie, but it's far from being the worst one out there. I still say check out the Ultimate Edition, as it adds so much more to the overall story than the theatrical cut. But the next one I'm going to talk about after this was DC at its absolute fucking worst. Stay tuned for my upcoming review of Suicide Squad coming soon. Till then, I'll see you all next time.